So welcome to the show. Today we're with the owner of DK Connemara Oysters, David Keane. How you doing, David?
Very good, very good. And yourself?
I'm brilliant, thank God, and it's lovely to have you on the programme.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're all comparing our COVID hairstyles here before we went on.
I'm actually trying to hide mine, David. So, David, tell us a bit about your background and yourself.
Well, I suppose professionally, I'm an accountant. Okay. I had several years done in private practice. I then went on, I worked in freight forwarding. I had a freight forwarding company with a large exposure there to China and Southeast Asia. I sold that business before the last crash, around about 2007. Came home. Really, the children then grew up. The two guys grew up. They were heading away to college. And then I went looking for an alternative business. And I came across the oyster farm back in late 2013, 2014, which is situated down in Letterfrack. Owning an oyster farm was fairly simple, really. It was looking for an alternative business. That was the idea, to look for an alternative business. At the time, we'd seen an awful lot of, property crashes. We'd seen a lot of the stock markets crashing out. We'd seen our pension funds decimated. And I suppose really looking back at it, if you take people like, on the stock market, you had companies like Tesco's is a very good example of it. All right. The Tesco scandal broke. Volkswagen and that scandal broke. Mm-hmm. These were sort of, mainstay companies that we trusted. And nothing ever happened. And I was there looking at this and I said, I don't care. This is risky business. People used to go on about oyster farming. Yes, it is risky. It's very high risk. But you know what? You're not dependent on Trump. You're not dependent on what goes on over in the UK. You're not dependent on some silly politician. What are they going to come out with next? Your keeper is Mother Nature. But that's it. That's as far as it goes.
And had you any interest at all in oysters, maybe other than eating them?
No, none whatsoever. It was an unusual investment. The reason, I suppose, number one, I understood farming, okay, because I come originally from North County Dublin, so there's a lot of market gardening down there. And as a young guy, I would have been like us all. We all worked part-time or summer's jobs, mm-hmm. Picking potatoes and that sort of stuff. So I understood the basic principles of farming. That's the first thing. I also understood animals, and a lot of farming is about observation. So for me, that was the understanding of it was probably easier for me than it would have been for a lot of other people. Then the other thing was there was a big push on within Europe at the time, and the Irish government, and there still is, to develop aquaculture throughout Ireland. And if you consider it, the future of food is in farmed food. I mean, the future of sea, the fish, shellfish, all this is, the future of it is in farmed foods. It's not in as much as that we would like to see it, but the truth of the matter is we're probably destroying our oceans. And if we're not actually farming, where are you going? I mean, the world needs food. Yeah. So that's really what brought me into it. It was an interesting, completely different than anything I've ever done before. But because I'd worked in private practice for so long, it's much easier for me to get the idea of, various businesses and how they operate. And once you understand that each business has its own central core, once you get to identify that, then the rest of it is it's like buying and selling sweets, buying and selling computers. It's the same thing. It's production. You have your production, your admin, and your sales and marketing. That's basically all. It's 3 segments of every business.
And I'm interested to find out, did you happen upon this, or did someone approach you, or how did you even know that the oyster farm was for sale?
Well, at the time, I was involved with a group called the Irish Investment Network, and I was actively looking for alternative investments, and it came up there. It came up on that website, and that's how come I came across it. So then I spent about a year, the guts of a year, traveling up and down and looking and trying to learn about it. Obviously, the state agencies like BIM, they were very helpful. There was a lot going on at that time, which even at that time, if you consider the banks were being asked to support this as an industry, so there was a lot of activity back in 2013, 2014 around that.
Brilliant. So tell us a bit about the location and, what's maybe special about it?
Well, the farm is situated down in Letterfrack. Letterfrack is Connemara, obviously very, very close to Clifton. It's on a peninsula, the Davros Peninsula. And the Davros Peninsula is just off the Renville Peninsula. And what makes it so special? Well, I suppose you have the Connemara National Park. And the Connemara National Park is basically the Connemara Mountains there. And the rivers and streams coming down off the mountains flow into Balnakill Bay. And Balnakill Bay flows in around the Davros Peninsula. It brings nutrients from the mountains, and they merge with the Atlantic Ocean. And that gives the oyster its unique flavor. So an oyster, it takes its flavor from the bay it's grown in. It's like a wine. It's like the terroir, the relationship between the grape and the soil. An oyster is no different. It has its relationship between the rivers and streams that flow into the bay it's grown in and the ocean surrounding it. So in our case, it's the Atlantic. If you think of the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean, the saltiness of it, the cleansiness of it, the lack of any pollution over on the west coast there. I mean, there's no industry, there's no heavy farming activity. So to a large extent, there is a big difference between, say, the Irish Sea, the Atlantic, the Mediterranean. They all have different offerings to bring to the seafood that's grown. So if you come to our bay and you taste our oysters, they will be completely different to the oysters grown, we'd say, 5 miles down the road. There are different influences there. So also what makes it unique is it's one of the oldest farms in Ireland. It dates back to 1893. It's license number 171, so it's the 171st ever licensed farm in the country. And it's pre-the-state. So it's one of the few that can be bought and sold in perpetuity.
Brilliant.
The day if you get a license, you get a license off the state for 10 years. And after that, I mean, you never own it. Whereas in this instance, we actually own the license to the seabed where we're entitled to grow the oysters in.
So you can basically sell that on to someone and they'll have the same benefits for the rest of their lives as well?
Correct.
Which is amazing. I have to say, I'm salivating listening to you talking about that, the land and obviously the Atlantic Ocean is amazing. The West is a beautiful part of the country. Absolutely love it.
Well, if you consider that the Atlantic Ocean, as far as Ireland and the West Coast is concerned, is hugely influenced by the North Atlantic Drift. And the North Atlantic Drift starts out somewhere just out of the Gulf of Mexico. It's a huge distance to cover from the Gulf of Mexico all the way across to the east coast of Ireland, the west coast of Ireland. Now, they tell me, if for a moment you can imagine you're a droplet of ocean, a droplet of water sitting in the ocean, and if you were to come all the way from the Gulf of Mexico, all the waves, if you were a cartoon character, and you travel all the way across up along the west coast of Portugal and France, come down there to the south coast of Ireland, hang a left, come on up along the west coast of Ireland, down into Balnakill Bay, and all the way back out. That journey, and then to go all the way north again to bring you back down to the Gulf of Mexico, would take 1,000 years if you were a droplet of water. So they say. So there is, if you can imagine it, there is a huge benefit there, and the cleanliness of that water. And the other unique factors about Balnakill Bay is obviously it's grade A water, but we have been part of a European study. The Europeans have been trying to get the idea of norovirus, which is the winter vomiting bug. And oysters by nature are mollusks, and they clean up the water. So they've been trying to get the idea of what is a safe level, or how much norovirus do we have in the water. So as part of a European study, Balnakill Bay was tested on a monthly basis, and more recently on a weekly basis for the last 4 years. And we're either zero norovirus, or if it does exist, we are below measurable quantity. And that's a very, very unique factor. And a lot of people would say we're very, very lucky.
Selling point in itself?
Well, certainly when you go into, if you consider food and the safety of food moving forward in the world that we're in, and the idea of food being safe and being positive for our immune systems. If you enjoy shellfish, you enjoy oysters, there's no doubt about it, it's very, very good. I mean, the factors, the positive contributions that oysters make to nature and to the human race is far, far greater than any farming activity will ever take back, if you understand what I mean. It is a positive, we're positive.
I didn't know that, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me, David, I think you'd said that it takes years to grow the seed until a fully fledged oyster. So when you had bought the farm originally, was there already adult oysters there, or did you have to start from scratch?
No, the farm had been run down. As I said, the farm dates back to 1893. There have been various owners there from the early 1900s, all the way up to when we took it over, and we bought it off a Frenchman by the name of John Mauger. It had been run down. For all intents and purposes, we spent the last 4 years recommissioning it. Now, it takes 3 years to grow an oyster from seed to plate, a minimum of. And so we put down our first seed in 2015, in the autumn of 2015. So let me see how to describe it. I mean, no, there was nothing there, and we were basically recommissioning. So we were cleaning it up while at the same time putting out new trestles, putting in new equipment, etc. What happened was we asked BIM for assistance, and they introduced us to a consultant who came down, and we employed a local team of men. They all live on the Renville Peninsula, great guys. We have Michael Lydon, Paddy Lacey, and Chris Lacey down there as our permanent trio. They're very, very good guys, and we all learned it together. Now, as I said earlier on, a lot about farming is about observation. Mm-hmm. And once the basics are explained to you, the rest of it is about observing what's going on and how you handle it. And it's been a very interesting, and it's been a very, I suppose, rewarding journey in many respects. As I'd always say, if it wasn't for the money, it's great crack.
Good man. I'm actually interested to know, and maybe the viewers will be, if maybe someone wants to start an oyster farm, what do you do for income in the gestation period?
Well, there is none. Right? I mean, it's money out, money out, money out. So when you start off, you have to have a very, very large working capital facility. Now, obviously, once we realized that, and we had something, so we say around about 2016, we now had seed growing on the farm. 2017 came along, and we had fast growers. I couldn't believe it. We actually had a ton of oysters which were at commercial weight of 65, 66 grams. Now, really what happened was I turned and said, well, look, what are we going to do with a ton of oysters? Commercially, it wasn't, it might generate whatever, but it wasn't going to put our lights out, or certainly wasn't going to make much difference. So I got the idea of doing farm tours. So the idea of doing the farm tours was, come and visit an oyster farm and see how oysters are grown from seed to plate. And guess what? We'll do oyster tasting with you. And because it was money out, money out, money out, it was a novel idea. And I really got it from friends of mine up here who own Newgrange Farm. They started to do farm tours, and I said, well, why not try it? My wife thought it was absolutely crazy. You know, I headed off down with my A4 sheet of paper. I said, hey, we're going to try this. So we spent in 2017, I suppose, basically inviting people onto the farm free of charge. We were just developing the tour. And really people started to enjoy it. And then in 2018, we really launched it. And in fairness, again, this is, I have to say, I think there's an awful lot of government supports out there if you know where to go to find them. And in this case, we had Fáilte Ireland and the local Discover Ireland. And I went into the local tourist office in Clifton with my A4 sheet. And the lady in there, whose name escapes me, I'm sorry, I didn't think I'd be bringing this particular thing up, but my apologies to the lady down the Clifton tourist office, who very kindly helped me to put together a leaflet. That was the start of it. And, you know, she pointed out to me some of the things that I'd put in wrong and that sort of thing. And so we developed from that, and then we got in with, we got in with Fáilte Ireland, and we got some of the training there, and that allowed us to go on and do things like Mehel, which introduced us to operating with tour operators. And that brought in the idea of the private tour and the public tour. So what we do is, during the season, we run a public tour. Well, we did pre-COVID. We ran a public tour daily at 11 o'clock, open to the public. We were getting a lot of bookings coming in from Airbnb and online. And then after that, we worked with tour operators who brought with, you know, if you give you the idea of the couple who want to do something different. So they're coming and they're staying in the likes of Ashford, Dromoland, they're in the chauffeur-driven car, and they rock up down to the Oyster farm, and we close the farm and we do a private tour with two people, or whatever the number that they wish, and we offer them a private tour of the farm on a one-for-one basis. So we do everything. Like, we try to make it an interactive tour, encourage questions. We do oyster tasting, we do oyster shucking demonstrations. We show them how the oysters are graded, and we go through the whole process from start to finish, including, and this is a bit peculiar word to most people, the depuration process. Now, depuration is spelled D-E-P-U-R, depuration. Okay. You know, as purification. And so what we do there is we take water in from the bay, we pump it through ultraviolet light, and the oysters are allowed to flush out using the ultraviolet light. So how I describe that is, it's like it's preserving the integrity of the flavor of the oyster. We're using the same water that they're grown in. It's like cooking with alcohol. We're getting rid of the alcohol or any impurities, but we're preserving the integrity of the flavor.
Would that be a normal process for oyster farms?
I would think nowadays, yes. In theory, grade A bay, you don't have to do it. Okay, in theory. We do it all the time. So if we go out to any oysters that we're selling off the farm, go through the depuration process. And then during the season, we're testing, now it's mostly through the winter season, there's weekly testing for norovirus, and we also maintain samples of the meat, we freeze it. So if something does go wrong, it gives a great security, a wonderful bit of security to the restaurants, etc., that we're providing. Also, going abroad, nowadays, getting to places like Hong Kong, Singapore, Sweden, all those countries, if you're not purifying, you're not getting in. That's basically it.
So David, I'm sure people really enjoy the tours because your natural storytelling ability shines through.
So what we try to do is we try to use whatever's happening on the farm on the day and make it part of the tour. Now, I'm not the only one, by the way, who gives tours. Christopher does tours and Carmel does tours. And while the basic tour, how I put it this way, the transfer of knowledge remains the same, how we deliver the tour is completely different. And we don't do, you know, it's not scripted. We let it go, we let it run. And, you know, you can be out there and people just rock up and we take it as it goes, whatever's happening on the day.
Sounds great. So tell me, and you touched on it in this a wee second ago, where do you actually sell your oysters? Would it be mainly at home in Ireland or abroad?
Well, there's a combination of factors there. Initially, we were aiming mostly for the French bulk market. Now, in the bulk market, you are a price taker and not a price maker. Mm-hmm. So likewise, when we started to develop the farm tours, I said, you know, hang on a second, very shortly now, we're going to have more than just 1 ton because we put in seed and the infrastructure to grow a lot more. And we better start looking around for markets. So initially we started to develop a website and create a market presence. And I was looking at different opportunities. And obviously one of those opportunities are restaurants and bars, the gastropubs. Mm-hmm. Another opportunity is retail, as in the likes of Super Value, Dunn Stores. So I went into our local Super Value in Clifton and I met with Joe, he's the manager in there. And I asked the question, I said, do you ever take stuff in from local suppliers? And he said, yeah. And Joe and Brian is the food manager in Super Value in Clifton. They came out to the farm, they visited, and they said, no problem, we'll take your product in. And that was the start of retail. So that brings with it a whole set of criteria, such as HACCPs. And I mean, HACCP is, look, it's a technical document, but it just allows you to, there are certain procedures you have to put in place before you're allowed to purify product and be recognized by the SFPA, the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority, to sell oysters to the public and to the retail. So that started us down that whole process. Out of that came Food Academy. We went for Food Academy, which is run by Board Bia and Super Value, and we were accepted there. In the meantime, the local restaurants became very, very important to us because without realizing it, every time we did something like this, we learned from it. Now, one of our very, very first customers were Dominic and Maura down in Lochina Lodge. They were absolutely brilliant. And I left in oysters with them for the first couple of weeks and they would just put them out, you know, offer them to customers as tastings. Right? We got their feedback. And we did the same thing. We did the farm tours, same idea. And then out of that, we started to produce, we started to supply to them on a weekly basis. And then the customer base grew from there. Others started to take it in. And a lot of the local restaurants around, like the Clover Fox in Letterfrack itself, EJ King's in Clifton, the Renville House Hotel, and they were all local to us. And we learned a huge amount from doing the packing process in a small way. And that allowed us then to expand and allowed us then to start supplying into restaurants and gastropubs in Dublin. Moving along then, we started to see, well, okay, as our product development got further, we started to look further abroad rather than, again, the bulk market. So while selling online, we were also supplying into the UK. We started to look at further afield, and prior to Christmas, prior to COVID, we sent out some trial shipments out to places like Singapore. And Singapore is zero tolerant to norovirus, and so it was an obvious place for us to go. And again, with the assistance of Board Bia, we got trial shipments out there. And we were looking forward to a very, very healthy and very strong 2020, both in the tourist market, the retail market, the restaurant market, and developing our markets further afield. And now we have a new situation to try and live with.
Yeah, it's obviously very difficult. But I think like the rest of maybe the people who've been on the programme, they're finding very innovative ways of coming around things, and maybe your tour should go online.
Well, we discussed that slightly, and especially since this idea of Zoom came along, and we've decided against it. I mean, you touched on it earlier on. But first of all, when you come and do a farm tour, you're live on the farm. Now, to give you an idea, you know, I never thought that we would get an American family or families to arrive into Dublin Airport, hop into a four-wheel drive or a minibus, drive all the way 4 hours down to Letterfrack to do a farm tour. But they have done. The same thing with people coming in from Southeast Asia. So they don't just, they come for the overall experience, and the experience is everything. It's all of your senses. It's the, you know, it's the touch, the smell, the communication, the you know, it's even not knowing what the weather is going to be like. Right? And like the funny thing is, people rock up to the tour and they're not worried about the weather. We all in Ireland, we all worry about the weather. People coming in from abroad, they're not interested in the weather. They come very well kitted out, and they have an interest in food, where it's coming from. And to be honest with you, what would we be doing? Zoom is great, but you lose that. You lose that
personal
essence.
touch, maybe.
Well, no, the essence of it. Yeah, the personal touch maybe, but the essence of it. You know, what actually happens on the day. And so we've decided against that. Now, it's not to say now that if someone we'll say, for example, we've offered this before, we've brought some of the schools, the cookery schools have come on, you know, GMIT, Notre Dame, these sort of places have come on to us. And from an educational point of view, where it wouldn't matter, it'd be like delivering a lecture. Yeah. You can do that in Zoom. But no, I think the farm tours are more unique. So we're not going to do that aspect of it. One of the difficulties with COVID-19 is you're trying to plan for something that you don't know. We've never been here before. We don't know what the future is going to be like. That in itself makes it difficult. But what we did do was, if we didn't stay in production, now obviously the oysters need to be minded. That's the starting point. So we are farming behind closed doors. Now, I say behind closed doors because we don't encourage people to come down onto the farm at all. You know, so where local people would have maybe in the past have come down and collected oysters, we'd say, please don't. The reason for that is very simple. The team of guys all know one another. They all live in the same locality. They all have the same raison d'etre to be free of COVID because they have the same elderly people to mind. Mm-hmm. So if one person on the team were to develop it, it means we're shut down, and then we've nobody to look after the farm. So that's really what's happened there. But the farming back behind the scenes, we're still farming as if there was no change. We continued to purify. We continue to offer online sales. We have been delivering online sales, both in Ireland and the UK. We have some distributors who supply out to the retail markets. And in the beginning, it was pretty stark. I mean, some people were saying, you know, the orders were so small, were you going to do it? And my attitude is pretty simple. If you don't do it, people are going to find someone else to do it. Mm-hmm. And then you're not going to have a customer. So the important thing here is to maintain your customer during these crises. And hopefully it will strengthen relationships and you'll have a better customer base post-COVID-19. Now, I'd also have to say, the government initiatives have been, I mean, they really just proved what is achievable when everybody pulls together. I mean, I don't know who's behind the scenes helping the likes of the government ministers in developing their various strategies. But they responded extremely quickly. I would think from a commercial point of view, the wage subsidy scheme and the way in which they managed to try and look after people has been very positive and has been a big help. And I think that needs to be recognized. I don't know what they're going to do post-COVID-19 when they say that housing situation can't be fixed, or, you know, because everyone's going to turn around and say, oh, you did it back in 2020 when you were able to, so.
Yeah, open the purse again.
Well, I suppose, yeah. But it was absolutely necessary. It was absolutely necessary.
Yeah, great. And in terms of, there's a focus on healthy eating and clean eating. Has that been a benefit to your business?
Not, I suppose, on a business-to-business basis, yes, because we can explain on a business-to-business basis the security aspects that we have in place. And I mentioned earlier on the idea about a HACCP. Now, again, all of our staff are HACCP trained. Again, now those courses are run by BIM. We're highly policed by the SFPA. There's monthly testing done. We ourselves do weekly testing then together with the Marine Institute. And so on a business-to-business level, yes, that's very advantageous. Mm-hmm. On a customer-based level, on a retail customer base, not really. People either like oysters or they don't.
Yeah.
Right? And if they like them, they're going to enjoy them. If they don't like them, not really too pushed about it. And we see it an awful lot with the farm tours. The idea that opposites attract. So we'd often see couples arriving down, and one person loves the oysters, and the other person, no thanks, David, no. Give him my share. I brought him here as a special occasion. It's his 50th birthday or whatever,
Right.
So
tell me, David, how important are trade shows, if at all, for small businesses like your own?
Well, we've done a couple of trade shows. Again, on a business-to-business level, there is a place for them, certainly. But I think what's far, far more important than a trade show is we go out and we do tastings, right? So if we go to and do an in-store tasting, there is no doubt about it. That certainly helps promote the product. Doing what we're doing today, mm-hmm. That's probably certainly equally, and I would probably say even more important than trade shows. The difficulty with a trade show is there's usually a lot of people. Now, and there's a lot of people passing your stand, and you can only talk to one person at a time. Mm-hmm. So, regardless, so as an example, we did the Holiday World show, which was run in Belfast, Dublin, Limerick. And again, more government support. I'll have to tip my hat there and remind people, Galway County Council and the year of Galway Gastronomy. That was a huge factor for us and helped us hugely in developing our product and in introducing it to possible retail base. What it allowed us to do was we went along and we went to the Holiday World show and we did tastings for people. People got to hear about us, and that's a help. Doing tastings in store, massive help. We will increase if we're doing a tasting. The sales on the day or on the weekend will certainly increase hugely for that particular store. That helps again build business to business confidence. Mm-hmm. So trade shows, there is a place for them, definitely. It's very, very hard to beat one-for-one contact. And that's the one great thing about a trade show is a lot of people, like-minded people go there. So you get to meet a lot of your customers in a very shortened window, and you don't actually have to go and travel the country.
Yeah, which is probably good for the likes of yourselves because of where you are, over in the West.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
You're quite isolated out there.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. But I'm probably lucky because I also live on the East Coast. So it's a 4-hour drive from my door to farm, right? But I'm a 40-minute drive from Dublin, and I'm probably I'm less than an hour to Belfast. So and that helps. And again, that idea of people often wonder and say, "God, David, you're mad. How can you manage a place and it's so far away from you?" But, you know, again, I suppose my past history came into play here because when I was involved in freight forwarding, we had an office in Hong Kong, we had an office in Shanghai. And look, you either trust your team or you don't. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. And I'm very, very lucky. I have a great team of guys. And we've all grown together. For example, my past, I would never have done as much, you know, front of house, if I can put it that way, as I'm doing now. Selling would not have necessarily ever be considered to be my forte. I'm not so sure it is now, but needs must.
I think you enjoy the theatre of it all. Yeah, I could picture you stand there shucking oysters in a shop. You'd be some boy to do it.
I enjoy meeting people, and that makes it a lot easier, you know. And as much as you enjoy listening to the story, so do I.
So tell me, I'm sure you've come up against a few challenges, David. But what sort of mistakes did you make at the start of your journey with the oyster farm, and any tips and hints maybe for someone getting into the industry or just in business in general?
Well, I think business in general is completely different to the oyster farm, because the oyster farm is a very unique type of business. Now, if I was to think in terms of the oyster farm, well, started a lot younger than I am. That'll be the first thing I'd say to you, because it does take 3 years to get to the starting blocks. And that certainly needed a lot of working capital. Leaving that aside, I must say, looking back on it, and we would do this a lot, I would be very analytical and going back, and I would try to be, you know, look back on what we have done and try to learn from our mistakes. But fortunately, no, we've been very, very lucky. But another way I'll say the same thing, we made our own luck. So how do we do that? Well, I surrounded myself with good people. That was the first thing. I'll mention them again. The team of guys we have down below, you know, Michael Lydon, Paddy Lacey, Chris Lacey, they're all local men. They all live locally. My mantra has always been, I went down to Letterfrack to build a business, not to start a war. So I'm an outsider, and there's no point in saying it any differently. Mm-hmm. But our business is not outside. You know, our business is very much tied in with the local community. And that's very, very important to us. And we had to work at that. So I think that's important no matter what business you're doing. Secondly, we're lucky because the people I met along the way, and I've mentioned them during this interview, you know, Board BIA, BIM, Galway County Council. There are lots of things out there, but you have to go and find them. And I would say be open to the supports which are available to you, plan for them, look at them, and you'll find that there is plenty of help. I genuinely believe that there is plenty of help. And certainly, you know, try and work with the system. You know, if you're good, look, let's not make it any more complicated than that. Try and work with the system. Find out the system and work with it.
You actually preempted one of my questions there about government agency help, and you seem to have got quite a bit.
I would have to say that I was surprised, because up until now, my main exposure to government help would have been Enterprise Ireland, and probably precursor to Enterprise Ireland was the old Industrial Development Authority, you know, and that was back in my time as an accountant in private practice. But certainly the start for me was with Galway Gastronomy. That was definitely the start for me. And Galway County Council, there was two people down there. Deirdre Tully works still with Galway County Council, but there was a girl brought in, a lady brought in. I was seconded in, Elaine, and for the life of me, sorry, I didn't do the research for this, but I can't remember Elaine's name, but she knows who she is, and so does everybody down there. And Elaine and Deirdre did tremendous work, and they were the start for us. BIM, obviously, Trish Daly in BIM was huge support in helping us get started. the grant aid people as well, and then Board Bia. Once you get to a certain size, we got in with Board Bia, and we also got in with Board Fáilte Ireland, I should say, and Discover Ireland. And look, you know, if the opportunities are there, but it's up to you to find them and use them.
Okay, that's great advice. And you touched on this briefly there. Is supporting local producers important to you, like around provenance and sustainability?
I think that's there's no doubt about that. You know, no doubt about that. Food has moved on, and let's be honest about it. I suppose we could say that oysters might be considered to be, you know, a niche market. Not all food is niche. Obviously, we eat everyday bread and everyday milk and everyday eggs, but look, people want to know where it's coming from, and especially the younger generation. I was surprised at the number of people of, you know, in their late 20s who would come and do a farm tour. Like, I never thought that would happen. I never saw that as such. Well, I hadn't, you know, certainly in their early 30s, you know, they're quite happy to come and they get dug in, you know. Providence, absolutely. And biodiversity, very important. People want to know all these things. Traceability.
Yeah.
Traceability is huge. And in our case, you know, we mentioned this earlier on, like the food, the seed, when the seed comes to the farm, we know what hatchery it came from. So it goes into a 4 mil bag, and you know, I don't have an example with me because I'm not on the farm, but it's a mesh bag. And you'll see this, if anyone wants to go on the website, you'll see it. And the idea of the 4 mil bag is it doesn't allow the seed to fall out of the bag. So what actually happens is when it comes on, we color code the bag. We put a tag on it. And that seed carries that same color tag throughout its whole life on the farm. So as an example, we would have a yellow tag, and the yellow tag is, say, France Naissan 2015. So France Naissan is the hatchery, 2015 is the year of the seed, came onto the farm, and it holds that color tag until it leaves. Now, leaving the farm, what happens is it gets a batch number going into the purification system. And that batch number is actually issued on the SFPA document. And so it's totally traceable from seed to plate. And when it goes out off the farm, it has a label which carries that same batch number, giving you the date it was packed and the quantity, etc. So we have a full traceability.
It doesn't get any better than that in terms of traceability. Literally from seedling to fully grown and everything in between. Brilliant. Yes. So do you think that the food industry in Ireland is actually growing, David?
Well, to answer your question, I probably don't actually know statistically whether that is true or not. But I'll tell you what I do believe. I think two things. Number one, the percentage of our annual budget is far less going on food today than it was, we'll say, when you and I were a lot younger or were kids. And the reason for that is because we're a far, far more affluent society. More importantly is that people are not only affluent, but they're far more educated and far more well-traveled. And with that, they're more willing to try new things. And so now, I mean, you know, people are, the choice available and the choices sought after are far greater than what they used to be. I remember back, I can't remember the year, but this was back in probably the early 90s, visiting what was the Super Quinn, you know, those stores. And I visited a Super Quinn store in Dundalk, and I couldn't believe it. There was a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne sitting up on the shelf for over 100, I can't remember, was it euro or pounds at the time, but like, I was amazed because the only other place I'd ever seen Dom Perignon was on, you know, 007 movies, the Bond movies. It was a weekend, and like we were shopping for the weekend, and I came home, and I was so fascinated by this story, it became dinner conversation, because Super Queen would not have been stocking that bottle of champagne unless there were people willing to buy it.
Absolutely.
No.
They're gathering dust, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so nowadays, I think, and equally, you go around, look at the choices available in the supermarkets. Look at the number of, the bakeries in the supermarkets, the fish shops, the counters in the supermarkets, and how more developed they are, and the butcher counters, and all these things. The choice is amazing.
And even the programs on television now, talking about all the different foods and showing you how to prepare them. I mean, that's gone through the roof.
Well, that's probably why I have Netflix.
Very good. So, David, tell me, in terms of your brand, where can we pick it up? Tell me how I can get your oysters.
Okay, we better talk now as we're talking during COVID-19.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can order online, okay? They are available in, if you order online, they're available throughout Ireland, including Northern Ireland and the UK. Okay. You can order on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for next day delivery. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for Ireland and Northern Ireland, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for the UK. As well as that, then, I know that there are 2 distributors who are sending them out. One is sending them to, I think, ethnic shops in Ireland. And then the other is sending them to both super value stores and Dunn stores. Then more recently, anyone on the East Coast, if you're staying down west around Clifton, Super Value in Clifton obviously have them. And then locally, we've been asked to supply into the Fisherman's Catch up in Clogherhead and Kerwin's locally here in Drogheda.
Brilliant.
So post-COVID-19, or I went back to pre-COVID-19, Kish Fish would be great people to distribute our oysters to restaurants around Dublin. Huge fans of Kish Fish. And then one of my great friends would be Richie in Seoul Seafood. They won, I think, the Restaurant of the Year of 2019.
Brilliant.
And anyone who's interested in food can see Richie and his family. They're doing on Facebook. I've done a whole series of cookery demonstrations and various dishes. And another great supporter of ours, great guy, Matt the Trasher's there in Pembroke Street, right? Well-known gastropub in Dublin. So if you're in Dublin, call into Matt the Trasher's or Seoul. Some of the retail outlets that Kish will supply. And
readily available anyway.
Well, all else fails, just give me a ring and I'll make sure to take it.
Okay, and lastly, David, this has been excellent. Tell me, what's the future? What's in store for DK Connemara Oysters? That's
a very interesting question. I said earlier on that at the moment, the difficulty with COVID-19, it's so difficult to plan for the future because we don't know what the future holds. Certainly with 2 things in my mind are going to happen. We're either going to develop a vaccine, which but everyone's talking about, it's a year down the road, or we're all going to have to start to learn how to live with this, in the event that there is no vaccine. Because one thing's for sure, we can't continue to lock down the human race. And I don't mean lock down economies, I mean lock down people in the way we currently have been. I don't see that as continuing. Second thing is, there is no, we've got used to a global economy. We really have. I mean, I have no idea how COVID-19 is going to affect it. It will affect it in some fashion. Certainly all these, major happenings do bring with them reactions. But until we have planes back in the sky, it's very, very difficult to see what the future brings. Ireland is very much an open economy. We love the idea of a global economy. We love the idea of being part of Europe. And for that, we need free movement of people and free movement of goods. I never believed for 1 minute when we sat down, you know, we developed a series of strategies, one around tourism, the other around retail, the other around restaurants, pubs, if you like, the food service side to it. And then we were looking at, you know, we look to exporting to further away economies such as Southeast Asia. Whoever thought that all your strategies in one fell swoop, that someone just flick a switch and turn them off? You know, you don't see that happening. Certainly not in my lifetime, right? Nope. We'd already been hit by a fairly major catastrophe back in the beginning of late 2018, 2019, when we were hit by a red tide. If you remember that really, really fabulous summer we had in 2018, it brought in it created a huge growth of phytoplankton, and it bloomed, and it came into the bay and killed off a lot of our mature stock. And that was a massive hit to take in 2019, because that was our first major harvest. So we'd managed to come out of that quite successfully. And we were really looking forward to seeing all of these strategies coming into place. So we had a lot of tours booked. Unfortunately, no one's traveling, and then you can't blame them. Restaurants will reopen. So what can I say? In a nutshell, yeah, we need people moving, we need cargo moving. But I'm positive insofar as this will not last forever. And even oil prices are going to come back up. Don't kid yourselves.
Brilliant. Well, David, that was absolutely outstanding. I thoroughly enjoyed your story, and I really wish DK Connemara Oysters all the best for the future. Thanks very much, and the viewers will love this.
Well, I hope you're able to edit
it. Okay, David, all the best for the future.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.